Welcome back, true believers and all you merry Marvelites, to another very interesting episode of Marvel's Avengers 101. Now, it is sad to say that we haven't actually received any full-on news updates regarding Marvel's Avengers other than that of the latest one with the pre-order information being revealed to the public. Especially given the crazy worldwide pandemic that's occurring recently and Square Enix's main focus primarily relying with that of Final Fantasy VII Remake, I don't think we're going to be receiving any information about the Avengers project anytime soon. Or, to put it another way, I don't think we're actually going to receive information about the game until after Final Fantasy VII Remake actually releases on April 10th. That way, once Square Enix finally releases Final Fantasy VII Remake to the public for them to get their hands on, they can finally move on to their next big AAA project with that of Marvel's Avengers. And seeing how we have yet to receive any official co-op footage of the game in action, I do believe that is going to be the next major showcase that the game will offer. But in the meantime, if you have been keeping up with the news, you will be aware that the Marvel's Avengers Prequel comic series is actually fairly close to being finished. Because in today's video, we are going to fully break down everything that you do need to know about the second to last issue within the Prequel comic series for Marvel's Avengers, with that pertaining to Captain America. Now, to be quite frank with you, which is a little bit saddening to say the least, but I do believe that the Captain America comic is actually the least impressive installment within the entire series thus far. For starters, the overall art style that this issue particularly holds is actually a bit lackluster compared to the other issues that we did receive previously. That's not to say that the other issues were anything special either, but rather that the entirety of this series has had a pretty generic art style to say the least. But out of every other comic that we have seen so far, I definitely believe that the Captain America issue is the lowest in terms of quality. And even though this issue is only focusing on Captain America as the main character, we don't actually see any other Avengers members show up within this issue. So even though it's great to get more of a background focus on Captain America's character within this Marvel universe, it would be nice to actually see him interacting with the other Avengers to see how they actually got along before A-Day occurred within the game itself. Since we do know that Captain America quote-unquote dies after the events of A-Day, only to eventually be brought back within the game's story because, of course he will, I definitely think seeing the Avengers interact with Captain America in their early days would be a very cool thing to witness within this comic. But instead, we only got World War II flashbacks to dive a bit deeper within Captain America's history within the army, which is cool to see, but I would have preferred both of them if at all possible. But on the flip side, these flashbacks do offer quite a bit of insight into the life of Steve Rogers during his time in World War II, fighting alongside of his army mates as Captain America. Not only do we see him connect thoroughly with each and every single one of the soldiers that he fought alongside with, but we also get a glimpse as to the full-on classic Captain America suit within the comic and game universe. And given how it has been previously stated by everyone at Crystal Dynamics and Marvel Games directly that we can expect a plethora of original and classic costumes to be featured within the game itself, I definitely think this suit can be added onto the list. Unfortunately for the comic's sake, the flashbacks are kind of the only interesting thing that's actually featured within this particular issue. And even that statement might be taking things a bit too far, considering how we didn't get to see any classic Captain America lore be featured within the flashbacks at all. And of course, I'm mainly referring to the big events that we could have seen within this comic, like that of Captain America's first encounter with Hydra, the original face-off between Captain America and his arch-nemesis Red Skull, as well as simply having a showcase or even a small reference of Captain America's best friend of Bucky Barnes, also known of course as the Winter Soldier. So if the writers of this comic did think that it would be cool to actually receive a deep dive into Captain America's history, it would have been cool if we were to get the complete history within this comic, but instead we're still left with unanswered questions. So hopefully that means that even though we didn't get to see any of those featured be showcased within the comic, fingers crossed that we could potentially see that be unveiled within the game's story directly. But moving on to the modern day portion of this story, it primarily relates to a pretty D-list villain of that of Batroc the Leaper, whose main objective in this comic is essentially attempting to steal shield technology from the weapons department of their headquarters. And based on what's followed from Batroc's plan, which is instantly foiled by Captain America, is that SHIELD is now able to be more secure with the weapons that they are holding at their secret facility. It's also implied that Batroc is trying to steal this equipment from a client of his, and even though we don't know who that could be, my guess is that it's either George Tarleton or Monica Rappaccini, who of course, if you have been following along with the other comics, is none other than that of MODOK as well as AIM's Scientist Supreme. And with everything all said and done, after just saving the day, Captain America then decides to ride off into the sunset on his handy dandy motorcycle by calling up Tony Stark to talk about the future of the Avengers. And yes, even though it did seem like I just sped through the overall majority of what the comic entails, there's not really too much going on here other than providing more context as to Captain America as a character. And even though it is small, we do see Captain America riding his motorcycle at the end of the comic, which is also showcased on one of the variant covers of this issue in particular. Since we do know that the Avengers project will feature numerous amounts of hub worlds to explore, there is a questionable possibility as to whether or not characters could actually use vehicles in these hub worlds when traversing around these areas. And while we are still waiting for more information to be revealed about these hub worlds and how exactly we can traverse around them, there is a possibility that the more human characters like that of Captain America and Black Widow could possibly use vehicles to travel around the world instead of doing things like jumping and flying. This was also something that was previously mentioned by one of the game's creative directors of Noah Hughes, who I was actually personally lucky enough to interview during E3 2019. So even though I'm not entirely sure how riding vehicles around these hub worlds will work, it will be very interesting to see how that all plays out by the time we end up seeing more footage. But in the end, everyone, even though I did appreciate learning a bit more about this universe's version of Captain America on a personal level, I wasn't at all satisfied with the final product that this comic entailed. So here's hoping that the final comic of this series featuring Black Widow, which is scheduled to release on March 25th, does something to truly surpass all my expectations that I do have for this game's story. And last but not least, if I did have to officially rate this comic, I sadly would give it a 4 out of 10. But with all that said, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What did you personally think of the Captain America prequel comic for Marvel's Avengers, and are you excited to read the last installment of this series with Black Widow? I'm really curious to see how exactly Black Widow's story will pan out, considering how it's going to be the last one of the series directly leading up to the events of A-Day. And knowing that we are going to get a bit more in-depth analysis as to Black Widow's relationship with Taskmaster in the comic, it's going to make for a very interesting story. But until that time comes, everyone, thank you all so much for watching, stay merry Marvelites, and peace out.
Do the Avengers pose a danger to society? That was the question, Bruce. That was the question.
Did you even check the science? Did you check
It was a
the science?
heist, Bruce.
No.
We were outsmarted.
The Terrigen reactor was unstable, and you knew that, and you still paraded it before the entire world.
So what? We just give up?
We didn't give up, Tony. We failed. At least I can admit that.
No, we failed him. We failed him.